Hello?
Hello!
Okay. Hi, thank you all so much for being here today. I feel deeply honored and humbled to be in a room full of people who share a dream of inspiring and supporting the youth in our communities. In having brief conversations with some of you, I know already that we have aligned missions and that you are the people that inspired me when I was a little girl, growing up in foster care and yearning for adults to see me and to support me. I want to start by just sharing bits of my childhood. I grew up in Los Angeles. As mentioned, both my parents were undocumented. They came to this country with their own share of experiences and traumas and stories that they could never share because culturally, traditionally, it was not a thing that we did. So they just endured. And as their child, a product of their trauma, a product of their love, their resilience, their desire for a better life, I also endured. That was my inheritance. And as a child, I thought everything was just fine. I had a beautiful life. I had parents, I had a home, I had clothes, I had food. And because of those basic necessities, I had no idea that what I was experiencing at home was completely abnormal, that I was constantly exposed to things that no person should ever have to witness. I was suffering physical, emotional, and verbal violence on a daily basis. But from my perspective, life was beautiful. And I genuinely believed that I was the most loved child on this planet, that my life was perfect, and that I had nothing to worry about. Because when my life was put into perspective with my parents and hearing about their upbringings, I just thought, well, it's not that, so this is it. And that life was rattled the day I entered the foster care system. I was 9 years old, and the only context I had for foster care was that that's where bad kids went. When kids behaved poorly, that's where they would send you. And at first, I just had no idea. I genuinely thought I had been abducted. I had foster siblings in that first home, and they spoke very little English, and through pictures, drawings, images, we tried to communicate with one another where we were, what was going on. We didn't know who this lady was who was taking care of us. She was abusive and neglectful and an alcoholic and would forget to feed us. So I genuinely thought like we were abducted and something was horribly wrong. And it wasn't until my first court hearing, 2 weeks into being in that home, that I heard the words foster care for the first time. And I stood on the left side of the courtroom and stared at my parents at the other side and cried and just wanted nothing more than to be with my parents again. And when I heard that we were in the system indefinitely, the first thing I thought of was, I didn't clear my desk out at school. I didn't finish my homework. I didn't get to hug my friends goodbye. And in that moment, I became a ghost. I was a memory. I was a story on the school playground, and this was my reality. As a 9-year-old, I had to endure the changes in my physical environments, the new caregivers who were in charge of providing support, food, basic necessities. I had to show up at school, business as usual. I had to be well behaved. I had to make sure that I did not mess up, because messing up meant that I was going to be switched placements again and pose the risk of me not being able to see my siblings or me not going back home with my parents. So I'm carrying all this weight as a 9-year-old, believing that I'm in the system because of something that I did, that this is a system where bad children go, that even with strangers, something that I'm doing is horribly wrong because I'm still being abused. and wondering, well, why is it that I was removed from my original placement with my original parents and placed with people who are still hitting me and still neglecting me? But I just endured. Again, that was the thing I learned how to do. And so I showed up to school. I relied on my teachers. I had trouble sometimes connecting with other children because I was a very precocious child. I like to imagine a lot. I like to draw a lot. But I often got in trouble for drawing. And while teachers wanted to understand me and the adults in my life wanted to try to figure out why this is my thing, I was often met with shame. And 4 foster homes and 9 months of foster care system later, I was reunited with my biological mother. My father, who was my best friend, fell into a relapse that he never came back from, lost his parenting rights, and that was my new life. The night I was reunited with my mother, she physically abused me. At this point, I'm 10 years old, and I remember sitting at my staircase with the very heavy existential question, what do I do now? And I thought about my possibilities or what my options were. I stay at home with my mom who loves me, or I go back to a foster home where they will still hit me. And in that moment, I promised myself I was going to grow up and do something about this. I was aware that something at this point was wrong. Something that was happening in my childhood did not sound like the childhoods of other children that I was engaging with. And instead of doing something to fix it in my life, I started thinking about how do I fix it for others when I'm an adult. And once again, I endured. I spent the rest of my childhood going to school with a big smile on my face and being a really good student and being very helpful, and coming home to the woman I loved the most, who was also my biggest bully. And every day I would come up with a new excuse to conceal my bruises or my injuries, or why I was feeling a bit sensitive at school. Sometimes that manifested in isolation, withdrawal, a bad test, a bad grade on a test, not finishing my homework. And again, it influenced the belief that there was just something wrong with me. That when I was not smiling at school, it was because I was not trying hard enough. When I didn't finish my homework, it was because I was not a good enough student. When my mother hit me, it was because I was not a good enough daughter. And that was my life. That was my childhood. I did not get to revel in the innocence and joys of what it means to be a kid, to not be so parentified, to not be so exposed to things that never belonged to me. I just took on and on and on because I believed that it was my job. And no matter how much I wanted to express these concerns to the adults in my life, I knew that it came with the risk of being separated from my siblings again, of putting my mom through the suffering of losing her children once again. So I endured. When I was 20, I missed a bus, and a woman was running after the same bus. She missed it as well, and we started talking. And around that time, I had been really wanting to work with youth in foster care. It was always my dream, and I just wanted to understand what actually was going on in the system that hurt me so badly that I felt like I truly had no other option but to live in a house with a woman who had so much untreated trauma, and that's just the life I had to live. And this woman started conversing with me and shared that her brother-in-law was the executive director at a nonprofit called Peace for Kids. It felt very serendipitous, it felt very woo-woo, spiritual. And I was like, I manifested very hard just now. But I was scared because I thought about my mom as a child. And I don't think my mother ever dreamed of hurting her children the way that her mother hurt her. I don't think that my mother dreamt of being the woman she feared the most when she was a child. I don't think my mother dreamed of having a daughter and hurting her so badly, making her question her existence or her goodness. I think my mother also just wanted to be a kid, and she never got that opportunity. And when I was presented the opportunity to work with children who were in situations like mine, I was overridden with fear. And I wondered, what if I'm the same way? What if this thing that I feared becoming is also my reality? And it presented itself as a blockage in my life, and I hesitated, but I finally showed up. And when I initially went, I genuinely believed that I was going to go there to change children's lives and to be a hero and to do some great things, and I was very quickly humbled. I did not realize that what I really needed was a space to collapse. I needed arms to fall into and say, I'm scared. I've been scared for so long. I'm exhausted. I actually don't know how to do this. I'm scared of messing up. I'm scared of what happened to me. And I need to be seen. 10 years later, I've been working to really understand who it is that I needed when I was a child. I am never going to be a child again. I can relive childlike moments in my life, decorate my apartment in a way that feels like my childhood self would have really enjoyed, have really wacky pets that I feel like my childhood self would have loved, dressed in ways that my childhood self would have found safe. But I will never be a child again. I will never get to bask in the innocence and joys of a scraped knee, of finding a bug in the garden, of building forts with my sisters, sharing fun stories. I will never get to relive that without the stain of what I had to endure. And through my time at Peace for Kids and in working directly with children in foster care, I've learned that what happened to me, unfortunately, is a stark reality that so many children in our world, not just in the foster care community, but in our world, our classrooms, our neighborhoods, our cities, face. Children are the most vulnerable and most exploited human beings on this planet. They are the most taken advantage of. They are the most dismissed. They are the most innocent, the brightest, the smartest, most creative, beautiful human beings on this planet. And we reject them. Not the people in this room, because I genuinely feel like you guys are my heroes. But I look into the world and I see constantly that children are being rejected, that it's easier to turn off our televisions than to admit that there's more work that needs to be done. And how much more work can we do as human beings in this room when it all falls on us? When people constantly praise us, thank us for doing the work, when if every single person on this planet did their part, it would be a much safer place for everybody, not just children. But we reject that concept because it seems too difficult, and maybe our inner children are hurting. I've found through my work at Peace for Kids, through working directly with the demographic of children that are being impacted by the system that both broke me and inspired me to put all those pieces back together. I've learned that when we reject children, when we don't give them the opportunity to be children, they might grow up and become resentful of their children, of other children, of their own selves. They might continue to abandon themselves over and over again. And I genuinely believe that what every single person on this planet needs is a buffer, is someone or something to help heal that inner child. The one who cried with open arms that were never met. The one that endured. The one that held secrets that were so big, their small nervous systems couldn't contain them. The ones that witnessed and endured things that were never meant for them to process to begin with. As an adult, I've spent my life trying to understand who I needed and what I needed and why the actions I took as an adult were the way they were. And I have been met with a grieving child many, many times. A little girl who just wanted to play, a little girl who just wanted to dress up, a little girl who missed her father, who wondered why she couldn't see her sisters, who wondered why these adults were hurting her. And that work is very difficult. I could have easily taken that pain and made it someone else's. To sit with it and metabolize it and understand it and feel it, to metaphorically hold the hand of my inner child and to let her know she has someone now, has taken a lot of work. And to do that and then show up with children who have their own complex lives and origin stories and new set of challenges has taken a lot of work. At times has felt very draining and very hopeless when all I get is a pat at the back or a high five or a good job from someone who's not willing to do the same work. Last year, I wrote and illustrated a children's book about my foster care experience told from the perspective of a shooting star. This to me was especially significant because as a child, I used to read children's books with my father all the time. He encouraged me to rewrite the stories, to draw on them, something that really angered my mother, but he felt so proud of. And this was my way of reconnecting with him. For context, my father has been unhoused for 20 years, has struggled greatly with addiction and his own set of mental health challenges. And I've gone around the last several years, Skid Row, to find him. And I found him last year, and I brought him a copy of my book. And I asked him to read it to me the way that he used to when I was a kid. And to see my father as a fragile man, with shaking hands holding my book, struggling to make out the words, and remembering the man who inspired me the most as a child, to understand that there's nothing I can do to change this, and to hold the heaviness of that moment, is a lot for one person to contain. And I didn't have to do it, but I felt like a part of me needed to. After my father read this story to me, he shared that when he was a child, he wanted nothing more than to be a good kid, that he tried his best, that he really just wanted to be a good boy. But no matter what he did, he always found himself in a situation where he was getting in trouble. And it was almost like he couldn't control it. He was always in trouble. And his father would shame him and physically hurt him. His mother would abandon him. And this grown man was crying to me, sharing with me that all he wanted was to be a good son, a good child, and begging me to believe him, that he really did his best. And in that moment, I thought he probably tried his best to be a great father too. This inspired me to have more conversations with my mother. My mother was a refugee from a civil war that the United States funded. She was a very young girl enduring horrific abuse and also systemic violence, not only within her family structure, but also when she'd open the door to witness a war. My mother carried that with her and gave it to me, unintentionally. It lived in her DNA. And I didn't have to experience that civil war to know what it meant. Through her abuse, through her violent words, through the way she would stare at me, through the way she would switch. And I just wanted to understand her. And my mother held my hand recently and let me know that I was the best friend she'd ever had. Through tears in her eyes, let me know that no one's ever cared for her the way that I did. No one ever cared to ask her for how her day went, or to really get to know her. And she shared with me that when she was a child, sometimes she would wonder what it would be like if she died, if anyone would care. She felt so alone, that all she wanted was to be hugged, to be loved. And I realized that my parents yearned for the same things that I did, in different ways and in ways that I was not going to share with them in the moment. They just wanted to be loved as kids. They wanted to be seen and witnessed, cherished, appreciated as children. And they never got that. And I was born to parents who did the same thing to me unintentionally. From their perspective, they did their best, and I believe them. But that doesn't eliminate the yearning that I had as well. Fast forward, I was facilitating an art class at Peace for Kids, and it was with a group of 10 to 12-year-olds, mostly boys. And for anyone who works with that demographic of children, you know that's when they get really boisterous and smelly and obnoxious. And everything was the funniest thing in the world that day. Like the way they threw the water bottle, someone made a funny sound, and then all of them would start snickering, and it was distracting. And I voiced it, that it was distracting, that I was trying to facilitate a class and that I was feeling distracted. We were working with clay that day, clay that you mold. And the clay was a little hardened. We're on that nonprofit budget. They were really frustrated. And I heard some of them shouting with frustration. I watched some of them pound the clay, and some of them just leave it and say they don't want to do it anymore. And in that moment, witnessing those boys in their frustrated moments, in their distracting moments, I thought about my father. And I picked up the clay in front of the class and modeled to them, if I yell at this clay, it's not going to get any softer. If I hit this clay, it's not going to get any softer. And if I abandon this clay, it's just going to harden. And I held it in my hands, and I slowly started working with it. And I reminded them, if I'm patient, if I give it warmth, if I learn to work with it and understand it, I can create whatever I want. After this activity, I went up to each one of these boys who I had expressed were distracting me during class, and I let them know that I was grateful that they were in my class, and that I believed they were trying their best. That I knew that sometimes our bodies feel funny, and sometimes things are genuinely just hilarious. That I saw them, and I knew that they were trying their best, and I thanked them. And in that moment, I wish that someone could have said those words to my father or to my mother. I wish that my parents had had that buffer in their lives, that they had someone who kneeled to eye level with them and let them know that they were cherished. And that sometimes we make mistakes. We don't deserve to be shamed for them. We don't always have to apologize when we don't feel ready to apologize. We don't always have to get it right. And in this wondering of who did my parents need, I now wonder, who do these children need? How can I be a buffer in their lives? Who did I need? Who was there for me when I was a child? And how can we continue to do this, especially as our work gets harder? We feel collectively more exhausted. Our children receive that too. Who do we need? How do we need to be witnessed as adults in these fields? We hold the very sacred position of raising the children of our world, of providing those safe spaces for them, of being those buffers in their lives, of being the teacher that they mention at a dinner party was the teacher that believed in them, or the teacher that they share with their children about was their favorite one, or was the one whose class they like to hang out at after school, help them clean up and talk to, because they felt like the safest place for them to land. How can we continue to be those people, however, when we ourselves feel so neglected by the world, when we are so easily dismissed for the work we do, when again, the most sacred position to hold as an adult is the one that is constantly dismissed? We ourselves are exhausted. And I know that no one in this room is doing it for the pay. I know that for sure. How can we continue to show up when the world collectively dismisses us as well? I genuinely believe that being a buffer in someone's life carries more depth than we could ever understand. And I know that every single person in this room has that adult or teacher or social worker, school psychologist, principal, mentor in their own lives who you all think about when you think about your childhood. Their face, their name, their warmth, the things they told you, the things that you will forever carry with you. Because they were that buffer in your lives. And it is a hard journey to show up for the kids. It is the most important one though. And the more we continue to be buffers in their lives, the more the world will collectively understand how important it is to hold our children safe, to ensure they have childhoods, to ensure that we collectively care for them. And as I mentioned earlier, I will never get to relive my childhood, but I get to be that someone for so many children. I get to watch them grow up. I get to hear about their hobbies, their interests, the movie they just watched this weekend. I get to attend their graduations, their weddings. I get to meet their children. And that's sacred. And that never goes away. Please remember to hold yourselves in a space of love, because I know that I see every single one of you in this room. You are all the people that I prayed for when I was a kid, that I dreamt of being in my life. You're all models of the people who were there for me in school settings and who I never forgot. It is because of these people that I do the work I do today. It is because of these mentors and teachers and counselors that I'm able to stand up here and share my story and my journey with you all, because someone believed in me and there were buffers in my life, and that mattered. Please make sure to give yourselves the love you deserve, to take some space for you too, to acknowledge that the work you do is genuinely important. Because this is the work that changes the world. And we are the people who raise the children to make this world a more compassionate place. So thank you all for the work you do, and thank you for inspiring me. I really appreciate you.